you all for being here. And please feel free to interrupt with questions as we go, but I did put in some time as well for questions and answers. And so I know that learning about transitioning to college can be a lot. And so speaking as both a community college graduate and an administrator, I think that the community college path is an amazing bridge for a lot of students with disabilities leaving high school. Now, there's obviously some changes going from high school to college. There's things like scheduling, legal protection, setting goals, and timelines that have to be considered for setting up accommodations. And we're going to talk some about how those are provided, but again, please feel free to interrupt me with questions. I think the big thing to learn about is sort of the difference in laws. And so for students who are reaching the age for that transition IEP, I know that the discussion is starting about entering college. And right now, your students are probably protected under Section 504 or the Americans with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, and its amendments. And when they get to college, 504 stays there, but ADA is also introduced. And so that is the primary law that we operate under. A really easy way to understand that is IDEA looks at all the ways things can be modified for a student to be successful in their educational goals. ADA shifts and it looks at how do we provide access so that students are able to demonstrate what they know and show their mastery. And so that shift changes some of how we provide accommodations. And some of you may have a 504 plan in place. And 504, we joke about being kind of the grandparent of all disability law, because that, of course, was where it started. And then students go into IDEA and the amendments for K-12, and then they're covered with ADA and those amendments in higher education and beyond. And I'm not going to get too deep into the law there, but please feel free to ask questions. One of the things you may have started hearing about is FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And so FERPA changes a little bit of how we can talk to parents in college. One of the things I like to explain is I know that as a parent, you have been carrying this with your student for sometimes up to 22 years, where you've been the advocate, you've been the expert, you've been, the person in the meetings. And they get to college and we go, okay, we need you to step back and have the student do that. One of those things is because of the transfer of rights. And we'll talk a little bit about conservatorship, which is an exception. But when a student turns 18 or enters a post-secondary institution, their FERPA rights transfer to them. So parents can't access their records, their grades, their appointments, call and ask questions, connect with their faculty members. That falls to the student. And so we always want to make sure that it's clear that even if you're paying the tuition, we really can't share that information without written consent. And there are forms students can do to share information, but I also ask parents to think about starting to communicate with their students so that they demonstrate trust and let students become more independent, and ask for them to share that information with you as opposed to you going in and finding it, because that begins to allow them to gain independence in their education. We talked a little bit already about, required consent. Now, I will touch on conservatorship. We do have students in college with a legal conservator. The conservatorship has very specific elements, as any of you that have one know. So when we keep that on file, we look at what is covered by that element, so we make sure not to violate the student's rights outside of the specific things that we are allowed to share. And that kind of leads into more of how disability accommodations are done in college. This is student-driven. which is a shift from being driven by instruction and parents. So students choose to submit an application for DRC. They choose which accommodations to use for each class, and they connect with their DRC counselor for any updates to their accommodation plan. Now, with that said, I want you to know that we have a really proactive process in place where we begin connecting with our primary feeder high schools, Mountain View being one of them, and we are able to get documents shared. Students can do an early registration. They do field trips to the campus. So while they are still under IDEA and we can connect with them, we start getting those IEPs, 504 plans, response to intervention plans, and have them do the application for DRC so they are ready to go as they enter the college. At the same time, we're talking about using the accommodations. Our office tells students, you sign up for every accommodation that you are deemed eligible for, use them all your first quarter, and if you don't need it, okay, but it's a tool in your toolbox so that when you do need it, or if you do need it, you are ready to go and you don't have to go through another process. Now, in order to be eligible for accommodations, students complete an application to the Disability Resource Center. That application includes some basic information and submission of their verification of disability, which does include their IEP or 504 plan. But for a really robust understanding by us, if you have a copy to that psychoeducational evaluation or the medical documentation with the 504, we would love to have students attach that in their application because it does help our counselors. Once we have that, we schedule an intake meeting. And during that meeting, the student meets with the counselor, talks about the impact of their disability, talks about what accommodations they've used, sets up what accommodations they'll be eligible for in college, and that counselor walks them through how to use all of those accommodations and make sure that they're familiar with our online systems, as well as talking to them about their degree planning. So our counselors not only set up accommodations, but they can also do academic counseling, which is really critical for students with disabilities who may need to consider the impact of disability when they're thinking about class schedules or instructor personalities they work well with, or how to schedule classes so that using their accommodations doesn't interfere with instruction. And then after they've met with a counselor, they are ready to go with their accommodations. And so each quarter, they request their accommodation letters to be sent to their instructor. And then during the term, they're allowed to request whichever accommodations that they've selected in their letter. For example, if a student is eligible for time and a half extended time testing, they've gotten their accommodation letter, it's sent to their instructor, and so they have their first exam. They go online, they request that accommodation, our test center contacts the instructor, requests the test, requests any special information, and the student just goes to the DRC testing center to take that test with full accommodations. But maybe it's like a PE class, and the student is like, I've got a test, but I don't want my extra time. They just don't request it, and they take the test in class. But again, I would encourage them to use it initially just to get a feel for it and make sure that they don't need it, because we cannot go back and do retroactive accommodation. So it's always best to be prepared up front. Now, we also want students to be really great self-advocates, and we want them to build their independence around disability identification, requesting accommodations, and empower them with that part of their identity. For students that may be interested in going to university, there is a much more hands-off approach than at the community colleges, and so students do need to be very self-aware and know how to go through the process. So we want students to start asking questions and, having conversations with their counselors about what their disability does to impact and how they have access. We want them to ask questions because for a lot of our incoming high schoolers, they're not only going to have questions about accommodations, but about degrees, about instructors, about how to navigate college, about Canvas. So that's what our team is here for, so they can learn about that and make sure they have their questions answered. And finally, hopefully by the end of their first year or so, know what their goals are. And that doesn't have to be a degree. Maybe they have a goal of getting employed and they want to do a short-term training. Maybe they just have a goal of taking a couple of personal interest classes and being successful in them. Maybe they have a goal of trying out college-level courses. Maybe they want to do an apprenticeship. So knowing what they're interested in and what they hope to do is really going to be of great benefit to them. And again, those are conversations with our counselors, with our transfer center. I would encourage students to take Counseling 5, which is a first-year experience course. And we actually have a class called EDAC that we are going to encourage all of our incoming Mountain View students to take. It is taught by a DRC counselor and mirrors Counseling 5. But in that class, they also complete their intake. So they leave their first quarter with their accommodations set up, with a degree plan developed, and with some resources around the campus that they can be introduced to. Now, there's always, how do we support? And so one thing is, especially as they're getting ready to leave high school, is scaffolding instruction. Talking about college, supporting them in planning, and just reminding them that they've got the skills they need to be independent. I would encourage you to maybe script out some examples. This is where something like AI comes in really useful. You can ask by a prompt and say, you know what? We're going in, or my student's going in for a meeting with a counselor about choosing a degree. What are some things they should ask about as a first-time community college student? And the AI is going to give you a few questions, and you can ask for some sample answers. And then let your student read over that, practice it, to give them some confidence about coming into college. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I would encourage you to let them take the lead. Know enough to be able to refer them to campus resources. And honestly, you don't have to know anything besides DRC. Our team is connected all over campus. Our student workers regularly take students where they need to go. So if they're overwhelmed and just need one spot, our office can assist. But while you're letting them do that, make sure that they know that you're there if they need you. Just if they've got questions and they're worried about answering, make sure you tell them that you believe they can do it. And I am not going to promise they're going to pass everything their first quarter. I certainly did not. But just reminding them that this is okay and college is for them and they can do it, and let's find the resources. Because for a lot of students who have a history of a disability diagnosis, this is a huge step. And sometimes they don't realize that they've got all the tools that they need to be able to be successful. All right, I'm not sure how I am on time, but do we have any questions?
You're doing great on time. We have about 10 minutes left, give or take.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't have any questions, man, the fastest lecture ever. I did not want to PowerPoint you to death. And I imagine that you've got probably more specific questions than what I can cover in, a broad PowerPoint on everything.
If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Or if it's okay with Stephanie, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Oh, please, ask away. And I know this is a lot, so also please feel free to give out my email address if people just want to send personal questions.
Okay.
One thing that I would ask is if you can please copy your student with that.
Okay. So if anyone would like Stephanie's email address, we can provide that. You can contact Laura Duran, our college and career coordinator, and we can get you two connected.
You know, and as I say that, it's in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so email's in the chat. Thank you. Okay. Guess if there's no more questions, we can. What do you think, Stephanie? Do you want to wrap up or would you like to continue?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure if there was anything pressing that we could get it answered or I could find an answer for someone.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening, and please let me know if we can do anything to support.
Thank you very much. Stephanie put her email in the chat, so if you'd like to copy that, please feel free. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. We do have one more session. It looks like at 7:05, so hopefully you all can join us for that last session. Thank you for coming to our Countdown to College event. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie.